She was just another soldier on the range, sweat on her brow, hands loading ammo into the belly of an Apache helicopter until the pilot's sharp eyes froze on her wrist. There, hidden beneath her glove, was a tattoo that should never have existed outside classified files. In that single second, the battlefield wasn't about ammo or training anymore. It was about secrets, betrayal, and a past that could burn nations to the ground. And if you're ready for the kind of story that pulls you inside the war zone and never lets go, make sure you subscribe right now, because what happens next will shock you. The desert heat was merciless that afternoon, rippling waves of air rising. Off the endless stretch of Nevada sand where the war range sprawled like an open wound in the earth, the sound of engines clanking steel and shouted orders filling the base with the restless hum of preparation. And in the middle of it all, she worked silently, a pair of oil-stained gloves on her hands, sweat dripping into her eyes as she hefted another belt of 30mm rounds into the belly of the Apache AH-64 gunship. Her movements efficient, precise, almost mechanical, the way someone moved when they had done this hundreds of times and yet behind her green eyes there was something colder, a discipline too sharp for an ordinary technician. But to the others around her, she was just another ground crew specialist, quiet, hardworking, unnoticed, until fate decided to shift. The pilot of the gunship approached with the easy stride of a man who had lived 1,000 hours in the sky. Major Daniel Carter, his jawline hardened by years of deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, his gaze sharp enough to slice through lies. And though he greeted her with the casual tone of a man checking on the readiness of his bird, his attention snagged in a way that changed everything, for as she wiped her forehead and adjusted the strap of her glove, the leather slipped just enough for him to glimpse the inside of her wrist, and in that fleeting heartbeat his eyes narrowed, his breath hitched, because etched into her skin in stark black lines was a tattoo he recognized instantly, one that had no business existing on any soldier in this range. A mark so classified that even uttering its meaning could land someone in front of a tribunal. It was the insignia of a unit that officially had never existed, a phantom task force whispered about in classified briefings, a ghost division erased from Pentagon archives after a mission gone wrong more than a decade ago. And Carter froze in place, staring at her wrist before she noticed, yanked the glove back down, and looked up at him with a flash of something dangerous in her eyes. Not fear, not surprise, but the raw calculation of someone caught, and though she snapped the ammo latch shut and moved to the next crate as if nothing had happened. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled taut. Carter said nothing at first, but his instincts screamed louder than any order, for he had once flown Overwatch for that very unit. A mission in the Middle East that went sideways, men disappearing into the night, whispers of betrayal, a blood-soaked village that was later erased from every map. And though he had never seen the operators' faces, he had seen their mark on recovered equipment, had been told in hushed tones that those who carried it were weapons given flesh, deniable assets that could be cut loose at any time. And now here it was, burned into the wrist of a woman who was supposed to be a nobody, an ammo loader at a training range. As the Apache's blades began their slow rotation, filling the air with a roar that shook the ground, Carter climbed into the cockpit. But his mind wasn't on the pre-flight checks. It was on the woman below who had just become a mystery he couldn't ignore. And when his voice crackled over the intercom to her, too casual, asking how long she had been stationed here, where she had served before, his tone was that of a man probing for cracks. And she, without missing a beat, answered with bland ordinary details about ordnance schools and logistics training. Every syllable rehearsed like a cover identity she had spoken 1,000 times. But Carter wasn't convinced, not for a second. When the Apache lifted off, sand blasting around her as she shielded her face and watched it rise, she felt her pulse hammering in her throat, because she had seen the recognition in his eyes, the silent accusation, and though she had spent years hiding in plain sight, living as a ghost among soldiers who thought she was just another nameless face. She knew the mark on her wrist had just betrayed her, dragging her back toward a past she had buried in blood and ash, a past that could never be allowed to surface, not here, not with him watching. As the bird vanished into the blazing horizon, she tightened the glove around her wrist, swallowed the fear clawing at her throat, and told herself she would handle it, that she had survived worse than Carter's suspicion, but deep down she knew the truth. One look had been enough to change everything, and the war she thought she had escaped had just found her again. That night the desert seemed quieter than usual, the stars sharp and cold above the barracks. But inside her chest the silence was deafening because she could feel Carter's suspicion pressing against her like a weight she couldn't shake. And though she tried to lose herself in routine checking ammo logs, double securing crates, scribbling inventory on clipboards, her hands betrayed her with small tremors she hadn't felt in years, the same kind she used to get when missions went wrong, when the exit route blurred and survival became a coin toss. And she knew then that Carter wasn't the kind of man to let things go, that he would keep circling until he tore the truth from her, no matter how deep she buried it. Sure enough, near midnight when most of the crew was asleep, he found her in the hangar, his boots echoing softly on the concrete, his shadow stretching across the floor like a silent accusation, and instead of the friendly small talk that masked their earlier exchanges, he went straight to the point, his voice low, almost dangerous, asking her where she got the tattoo and what it meant. And though she forced a smile, tossed out a lie about a drunken night overseas, some forgettable ink from a forgettable time, his eyes narrowed with the kind of quiet certainty that told her he had seen through far bigger lies before. And in that instant she realized something unnerving. Not only had he recognized the mark, he had history with it, fragments of memory flickering in his gaze. And though he didn't say it outright, she felt it in his tone when he muttered that he once flew cover for people with that same brand, his words dripping with a mix of resentment and respect. And before she could reply, he added something that shook her more than she let on. Whatever you're hiding, it's not just your burden anymore. If that symbol's back in the open, others will come looking. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her frozen in the echo of his footsteps, because deep down she knew he was right. Ghosts didn't stay buried forever, and if he had seen the tattoo, someone else eventually would too, and when that happened, blood would follow. The attack came without warning, just before dawn when the camp still lay half asleep. A sudden explosion tearing through the edge of the range and sending a column of fire clawing into the sky. Alarms shrieking as soldiers scrambled for weapons. And in the chaos she didn't freeze like the others, but moved with the same cold precision she thought she had left behind. Instincts snapping awake after years of silence, and when she caught sight of the figures emerging from the smokemen, in desert camo moving too fast, too coordinated to be random insurgents, her blood ran cold, because she recognized the stance, the formation, the ghost-like efficiency of operators trained the same way she had been. And at the center of them, she saw him, Sergeant Markov, a man she had thought dead a decade ago during the mission that destroyed their unit, his face older now, scarred but unmistakable. And the moment their eyes met across the fire-lit chaos, she understood why Carter's warning had felt so heavy. The tattoo hadn't just exposed her secret, it had called her hunters back from the shadows. Carter appeared at her side, weapon drawn, shouting for her to take cover, but when she moved, when she gripped the rifle he shoved into her hands, he caught the way she held it, the flawless stance of someone trained for killing, and his suspicion hardened into certainty even as bullets ripped through the night. Yet instead of confronting her, he fought beside her, covering her as she returned fire with terrifying accuracy. And when the Apache engines roared awake, he dragged her with him, both of them sprinting toward the gunship under the rain of gunfire. And as the rotors churned the smoke around them, she swung the ammo belt into place like second nature, her hands steady, her eyes locked on Markov, who through the chaos shouted her old code name, words that stabbed like knives because no one else alive should have remembered it. And in that moment, Carter finally saw the full truth for himself. She wasn't an ordinary loader. She wasn't a ghost from his imagination. She was exactly what the tattoo said she was. And whatever secret war she had been running from had just landed on his range. Pulling him straight into its fire, the Apache thundered into the sky, blades slicing through the smoke as tracer rounds stitched the desert below. And inside the cockpit, Carter fought to keep control while she manned the gun with the calm ferocity of someone who had lived this war long before stepping onto his range. Each burst of fire tearing through Markov's squad, yet never quite touching the man himself, as if fate refused to let their reckoning end too easily. Over the radio came panicked voices of command demanding answers, but Carter ignored them, his focus fixed on her, on the way she whispered coordinates without looking, on the way her hands moved like a shadow of the classified missions he'd once heard rumors about. And when Markov finally broke from cover, raising a launcher toward them, she didn't hesitate. She leaned out of the hatch, fire blazing, her voice cracking as she called his name, a sound torn between rage and grief. Because Markov wasn't just a ghost from her past. He had been her commander, her brother in arms. The man who had dragged her bleeding body out of a kill zone years ago, only to later betray the unit and vanish into myth. And Carter in that instant understood the truth. Her tattoo wasn't just a mark of secrecy, it was the scarlet brand of a program so black it had been erased, a unit whose very existence was denied by the Pentagon. And the reason she had hidden here, among loaders and mechanics, was because she had once been ordered to kill him and couldn't. Now as rockets screamed toward them, she pulled the trigger, shredding his cover, forcing him into the open. And for a heartbeat, their eyes locked one last time before Carter banked hard and unleashed a missile that turned the ridge into a storm of dust and fire, the shockwave slamming the Apache sideways, her grip slipping as she almost fell. But Carter's hand caught hers, hauling her back inside just as silence fell over the battlefield, only the burning horizon left as proof of what had transpired. When they landed hours later, command swarmed them, demanding debriefs. But before she could be taken away, Carter stepped forward and lied, telling them she was nothing more than a technician who had shown courage under fire. And though the officers didn't buy it fully, they lacked proof to challenge him. Yet when she glanced at Carter, she saw the question still burning in his eyes. Who exactly was she? And what storm would follow now that her tattoo had been seen again? And instead of answering, she simply whispered, "You'll find out soon enough," before disappearing into the shadows of the hangar, leaving Carter with the uneasy certainty that this wasn't the end of their story, but the beginning of something much darker. A war buried beneath wars, a secret that had chosen him whether he wanted it or not.